Excellent. Are we back? Some of us are back, at least. If you are back, please turn on your camera. If you are not back, well, then you can't hear what I'm saying anyway. Excellent. Open question, answers in the chat. What are two things that kill off a lot of startups? Name two things that kill off a lot of startups in your research, experience, idea, thoughts. Team, founder arguments, short of money, team conflicts, team. Money, internal fights, no market need, lack of motivation of team, founder's vision. Weak value proposition. Vision difference, created product. Lots of good answers. Now there's a tricky question. And again, I'd like you to answer in the chat. How do you find out why a startup failed? How do you measure that? When bankrupt, that's true. Then they're definitely, I love that. Then they're definitely failed. But why? How do you measure why is the question. Though I love that, that's a great opener. You speak to entrepreneurs, listening to the founders bitch about one another. Yep. Milestone and traction. No clients. Surveys, yeah. Lack of motivation after argument, excellent. So there is a Danish, one of these like Danish famous entrepreneurs, a guy called Martin Thorpel, who's created several companies and has kind of sold them for absurd amounts of money and is very much like a Danish business guru. Some people hate him, some love him, but he's definitely been successful. Now, I don't expect most of you to have known of him because he's Danish. But one of the things he said when we talked to him was, he said, I right now have a company that works on one specific thing, because I found out that the thing that kills most small startups is not that they have problems with the team or with their founders or with their selling or so on. What kills most of them is either one of two things. It's either one, they can't get in money. Maybe they're not selling enough. Maybe they're not getting investors. Maybe they're not getting funding of some kind. So that's one problem. And the other one is administration. They're simply dying because they don't have their stuff in order. They don't know how to do payroll taxes. They don't know how to do their bookkeeping. They don't know how to do contracts. They have a lot of stuff they simply fail at. That has nothing to do with the business and everything to do with actually running a business. That was his experience as a serial entrepreneur. So he said, I'm going to build a company that does one thing and one thing only. We're going to make accounting software and administration software for small businesses, because if I can help there, if I can take the failure rate down from 50% to 40% or whatever it is, then I can help the world. If I can help them from dying at the beginning because of bad administration, I can help more of them survive, and therefore I can help the world. That was his thought. And that meant that he went out and created a company called Dinero, which does exactly that, does accounting for small businesses. And the reason I mention it is because of two things. One is there's so much stuff out there that helps you with the thing that's not your core. There's so many ways to get help with administration, with invoicing, with contracts, with legal stuff. There are all sorts of options out there that simply were not there 10 or 15 or 20 years ago. So there's tons of help to be had. Highly qualified, professional bureaucratism. Yes, definitely. And this is the flip side of it. If there's a lot of bureaucratism, then you need to understand the rules or have somebody you work with that understands them for you, which is exactly what Martin's company Dinero does. Is it understands how taxes and how accounting is supposed to be legally, and then it makes it easy for you as a company owner. Now, that's interesting because there's so many places to get help out there. So one thing I want to leave you with on strategy is don't try to learn to do it all, but make sure that you get help. Because if you have a bad website, well, then you have a bad website. But if you have no website, that's very different. If people are looking for you online, the difference between a bad website and no website is pretty big. If you're doing invoicing, the difference between an ugly invoice that is missing most of the legal details and no invoice at all is huge. My brother and I started a company in 2006, and he left it. He was the administration and the business guy, and I was the one who could do the stuff we were doing. And when he left that in December of 2006, then I had to learn how to do everything. And I didn't know anything about anything. So for half a year, I didn't send out invoices because I didn't know how to send an invoice. I didn't know how to send an invoice. So for half a year, I did not send out invoices. I did jobs. Sure, I had clients. I was doing stuff. I was bringing in more business, but I didn't send out invoices because I didn't know how. Now, looking back, that's completely hilarious and idiotic because it's really not that hard. But to me, it felt hard. And the only thing that taught me how to actually learn how to do invoicing, which is, again, really, really simple. But the only thing that taught me was at some point I ran out of money. And I had all these people who owed me money because I'd done stuff for them. So I had plenty of money coming in. I just needed to tell them, here's how you pay me. And for half a year, I didn't do that. Now, today, there are so many options for getting help with the stuff you don't know how to do. Not perfect solutions, many of them, but better than zero. So number one, go out and get help, whether it's internationally, whether it's nationally, whether it's from friends who know just a little bit more than you. Get help if you don't know how to do it. It makes a huge difference because learning how to do the stuff that you're bad at may be useful, but it's also a surefire way to spending a lot of time on stuff that's annoying compared to spending time on the stuff you're good at. That's number one. Number two reason I mentioned Martin's story is that he found a place in the value chain where he could make the greatest difference. He's built several companies, several big ones as well. And he said he felt he could make the most difference at this exact place in the value chain. If you want to be an environmental activist, you can go with Greenpeace and go out sailing, blockading oil tankers. That's one way to do it. But you could also have a company that creates rain jackets that allows the people on that Sea Shepherd, on the activist boat, to stay out in the rain longer and keep more warm and therefore put in more hours. You don't have to help at one simple place. There are many ways to impact the world. There's some people who dream of making the best boots ever. There are some people who dream of making the soles for all the boots. So you can punch in wherever you want. And the reason I mention that now, because it might seem, yeah, that's a bit too late because we already know what we're doing. Well, guess what? The number of startups that end up doing what it is they thought they did or what they started with is incredibly low. The amount of pivoting, of changing, not necessarily the core vision, how they want to change the world, whether they're in transportation or entertainment or saving the planet, but the way they do it usually changes. And sometimes it changes a lot. So if you realize that just because your original idea doesn't necessarily go where it will, maybe something else will. And instead of trying to understand it all, get help. There's so much help out there. and a little help is much better than zero help. So these are two first things I want to share with you on strategy. And the third one, which is also a huge killer, is the lack of a roadmap. That's also going to be a problem when you talk to investors. If you can't come up with not necessarily a precise way, but at least some sort of idea for how you're going to get to where you're going, then it's going to be very hard for people to trust you. And it's going to be very hard for you yourself to know, are we actually going the right way? There's a beautiful scene in a reality TV show I saw quite a few years back where one of them says, which way should we go? And the other says, I don't know. And then he says, great, then we're going this way. Because if you don't know where you're going, then anyway is good. And just going somewhere, then at least you're going to learn something. But if you can, it's pretty hard to follow somebody who says, follow me, I don't know where I'm going. That takes a lot of charisma and a lot of trust to do that. But if you say, here's the roadmap, here's what we're doing, then it's much easier to find out what's important. And for that, we're going to create a roadmap together. And we're going to create elements of a roadmap that you can use. So we're now going to do a design exercise, which is going to be complete chaos, but hopefully also fun and also useful. Nicholas, can you take us to Mural or Miro or whatever it is we ended up with? If he says no, it's going to be a bit awkward.
Sorry.
Sorry, Claus?
Yeah, I'm here.
The other Nicholas, sorry, Nicholas. The backstage Nicholas.
Yes, Claus.
Yeah.
Please go on.
Yes. Can you take us to our other program where we can do the visual stuff?
Yes, one sec.
It's a long second, but we forgive you. And once we get that to work, I'm going to explain to you what we're doing. And if that fails, we're going to do it differently. But we're going to give Nicholas a couple of minutes to see if he can get it to work.
Sorry, Claus, it does not work, unfortunately. So
Such is life. Such is life.
Yeah.
We'll do something else.
Yes.
I am doing a improvisation, and we are doing it. This is not going to be nearly as elegant. But I'm going to open a Google slide where we all will be able to edit. And I'm going to put it in the chat. And I'm going to share my screen. Voila, we have a Google slide. Okay. And you can all see. So what I want us to do now is to, and it shouldn't be with big letters, with not too big letters, make small boxes that are about things that you should worry about as an entrepreneur. And it can be anything. It can be recruiting, it can be pricing, it can be websites, it can be flyers, it can be talking with clients, it can be budgeting, whatever it is. we're going to do a collective visual brainstorm. And now the tool we were going to use for it is great. Google Slides, less great, but still possible. So you right now should have editing rights to this Google Slide doc. That means start putting in stuff there, and then we're going to move it around afterwards. And it's probably going to be chaotic, but that's okay. Can you write stuff? Do we have another technological barrier here? I'm just seeing a white screen.
Well, I'm definitely writing. Yeah.
Better. Yeah, I think it was my presentation mode that that made it wrong. Do you see the stuff there? And now it's getting written, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So first thing is make the letter, make it smaller. Let's go 0.8 or something like that. You don't have to correct stuff. I'm going to go around and do that. Somebody else is doing that in a smart way, maybe. Ooh, thank you. And we're going to give them colors. For right now, everything just gets random colors. So it means make the boxes a little bit smaller. And it doesn't matter if other things have the same color, that's fine. Right now, we're just giving them some sort of color. I see somebody else is smart. I'm just doing it one at a time. So if you make sure that each thing is its own box, well, this how to exit is huge. We're going to there. Robbery of an idea. I like how that got big and orange. Okay, this is good. Now I need a couple of people to stop writing and instead start moving things around so they're near stuff that's more or less the same or in the same group. It's called clustering. So it's basically if there's something that says hiring and then something says managing new hires, then put those close to each other. So most of you just keep writing, but some heroes will volunteer to start moving stuff around. And meanwhile, I'm still putting colors on things. But since we're many people, we have enough hands to do a lot of things at once. Okay, we're going to do 1 more minute of writing, and then we're going to go into sorting. So 1 more minute where it's allowed to write new stuff, and then we're going to go into only sorting things. Got it? Now no more writing. Now start sorting stuff. And I know this is completely chaotic because there's no central control. That's very much by design. Even though somebody's moving the thing around, I'm coloring, that's perfect. Okay, and while you're moving stuff around, you can start recoloring it so that we end up having clusters that are close to each other distance-wise, but also have more or less the same color. For example, we have onboarding and teamwork and team dynamics in a sort of light blue over to the right. And if there's more stuff that fits there, that's good. And it means that other people should not use that color. So we're going to take things and make them a different color. And let's use the color red for stuff that's not sorted. So right now I'm going to turn things red. And that means that if you take a red thing, then put it the right place and give it the right color. Whoever wrote pure chaos is completely right. Okay, there's a lot of red stuff. Find places to put it and give it some colors. Good. Let's move that up here. Good question, Arno. We'll put on more stuff in a moment. Once there's no more red, then we'll add on more. Okay, now we have a decent clustered overview. It doesn't have everything. Some people will disagree, but it's not bad at all. Now we're going to take 2 minutes more. I'm going to set the clock and you're going to add stuff. Now we have the groupings. Now we have the colors. So 2 minutes more where you add stuff. Go. Can you hear the birds? Very nice. We have 1 minute more. And 30 seconds left. Okay, stop putting in new stuff and just get colors and boxes on the last things and put them in the proper places. So we right now have bureaucracy, which is putting in place. We have investors, legality, and logistics, prototyping, test, product development, and design. If somebody will put them in proper places and give them proper color coding, then that's good. We're going to move this a little bit because it seems we need more space. Oh, somebody else did that too. Perfect. Okay, bingo, stop. Now, I'm just going to go back to our group view here. How long time did that take? Roughly. $10.50, probably not bad. And this document that we've now created, that you now all have access to, how many think this is a useful document? Please raise hands or wobble fingers or do anything. Good. How many think it was a complete waste of time? That's also okay. It's probably the people who are, yes, one, that's good. So even if some people feel this was a waste of time, that's a minority. The majority clearly says, okay, this was actually pretty useful. And this, we now did it in the wrong program compared to what was the plan. We did it with a group that didn't know it was going to happen, and a group that is all over, with projects that are all over the place, and without any sort of structure or order except what happened organically. There was no central guidance. We probably don't even agree on the terms. We don't agree on what belongs where and how things should be structured. Some of you will think, okay, these things are relevant for my company. Others will think, I don't need anything with hardware distribution for retail because I'm doing a dating app. So the hardware is not necessarily to be found in retail because that's a very, very different sort of thing to sell. Now, even with that said, it's very, very simple. It's very, very easy to make these sorts of hive mind exercises. And one of the huge advantages you have, because you have this group, is that you have access to an amazing hive mind. And whether it's finding out, doing like this, we could have done this exercise with anything. We could have done it with who should I sell to, or who should we hire, or what should we be aware of when we're looking to scale, or which are our best markets, or what should we be afraid of. There are many different questions we could have asked, and we would have gotten something like this. Not the same answers, of course, not the same, but the same basic method of having a lot of people provide input and doing a little bit of clustering, even if it's organic, even if it's chaotic, even if it's not fully thought through, gives a lot of useful stuff. If somebody went over this, cleaned it up a bit, looked at it, like let's say a 3-person group, looked at this, made a little bit nicer visually, gave it some big titles, gave it some like nice lines to connect things, gave it some circles, some more nice visual stuff, then you'd have a pretty useful model. And you'd now have a cheat sheet or a visual guide for entrepreneurs on what to be aware of. So this would be one way to order the data. Another way, and I'm going to bring us back to it. Another way is, now let's imagine that we just put everything for a moment. We're going to put everything a little bit away from the top. And I love that pure purpose and pure chaos are the same thing here. That's very nice. Good. And we're going to take this down, and we're going to take this here and move here. Now, and what we're going to do here, this is another way of using the data, is to say, what are we going to focus on in the next 6 weeks? 2, week 3, week 4, week 5, and week 6. And let's say we take one company. We take Synthesy, which we just heard from, and we find out, okay, do they need to look at a sales pipeline? Is that like priority 1? Then it goes over here. Do they need to look at team dynamics? Maybe not, maybe it's here. Do they need to worry about IP? No, but maybe they need to worry about international collaborations. It's here. And suddenly it becomes a useful tool for figuring out what are we going to focus on when. And right now this is week 1 to 6, but it could easily be per month or per day or something like that. The nice thing about having data in a visual form is that it's so much easier to move around. It's so much easier to work with. And I'm going to show you guys a thing from my work. So this is a visual overview of a project. Now this is in Danish, so for most of you it won't make sense, but this is a visual explanation of what the project is. And this is one simple thing, but it has a step-by-step, what happens, who does it, it's divided into what are processes, what are people, what are locations, what are products. And what it means is that if you take something like this, it's very, very easy to look at what you're doing. And here's a second one, which is, this is our different sales channels. And this is divided into, we can choose to do this or not. We can influence this, and we can't influence this. And this is when the customer actually buys. This sort of thing is very, very easy to create. If you start getting stuff onto a page, you color code it to make it easier to work with, and then you start moving it around visually. Now, there are some people who are smart enough, much smarter than me, who can move all this stuff around in their heads. But the nice thing about doing it visually is that humans are good at thinking visually. We're good at taking the things that stand out, and we're good at dealing with different colors and with kind of different sizes, different shapes. So this is one way of making it easier to talk about the challenges we face or the things we're doing. The same here. This is like, what sort of communication do we need to produce? These are the must-haves. These are the ones that are up for debate. And you've just seen yourself how fast this can go, especially if you're not doing it alone. So that was one tip I wanted to leave you with on strategy, is visualizing strategy is a good way to make it easier to talk about, both internally on a team, but also with investors and with partners, etc. And I wish we could have done it using Mural, which is a nice tool, but yeah, now you know how to do it using Google Slides, which is not a nice tool. With that, we are reaching 5 minutes to 4, and that means that we're reaching the open part of this circus. That means it's now time for questions and for thoughts and for ideas. So if you have any questions, I can't say I can answer them, but I have a better chance of answering them, or at least providing some sort of useful input if you ask the questions. Please throw them in the chat in writing, and if it's a complex question that's better spoken out loud, then just write complex question and I'll call on you. And this can be anything. We just saw how broad the list is. And while people are thinking / writing, you're more than welcome to take the Google Doc we just produced. Just make sure that you make a copy, because else every time somebody edits in it, it's going to be completely and utterly useless. So if you want to use it for yourself, please make a copy. And I see that there are 0 questions, which must be either because I've said everything there is to say, or much more realistically, nobody feels I have anything to contribute with, or people are just kind of thinking about it. I hope it's the third one. Question here, in your experience, has it been better dealing with total honesty and openness versus some diluted version? I find I want to share everything, but other stakeholders are not so open. What's your opinion? My opinion is total honesty is the way to go, but that is very much a cultural bias. I am lucky enough to live in Denmark and be from Denmark, which is rated kind of the #1 most trusting society in the world. So that's a cultural bias. And it also means that sometimes I've run into some things where I've been an idiot because I've had my Danish views and I've just ended up being not cheated, but let's just say getting a bad deal. For a simple tip is that one of the things I often do, and I still do this, is that if somebody asks me for a price, I'll give them a range. I'll say my minimum is 5,000 and my kind of anything up till 18,000 works. So anything between 5 and 18,000, and then you fit it to your budget. And surprisingly enough, most people will not then choose 5,000. They'll choose what actually fits in their budget up to 18,000. In some cultures, they'll say, great, 5,000, and then move on. So when saying, well, royalties are for us not a deal breaker, so if needed, we can live with 0% royalties, but we would prefer a range between 5 and 10. Hearing the other person go, great, 0, moving on, showed me that was not the right thing to do in that situation. So I think it's very cultural. I would advise on openness and honesty, but also accept that culture is different. Some people just see that as weakness and as lack of being serious. Very, very cultural. Excellent. Should we worry about the failure? Yes, you should worry about the failure. And by that, I'm going to share a piece of information that spins things differently. I spent 15 years of my life building the world's largest live action roleplay company. And when that finally crashed due to too many dreams and too many bad decisions, I ended up personally with about €1 million in debt. So about €1 million in personal debt. Now, I've chopped off a solid chunk of that since then. It was 1.5 years ago. But I still owe a shit ton of money. And it's not my company that owes it, it's me personally. And that's not fun. That's terrible. I had a dream for many years that I would be able to earn €4,000 a month doing something I loved. That was my dream. That never happened. And then suddenly I was in debt and I needed to bring in 15 per month just to keep debt collectors at bay. That's tough. That's really not an enviable situation. And you should risk failure that has real consequences. But if you can make sure that those consequences are not too bad, then you should not be afraid of failure. I was an idiot because I didn't have a limited liability company. I had a personally owned company where I was liable for everything. And that was completely and utterly idiotic. And it means I now owe a lot of money. But if I just had a company that crashed, sure, I wouldn't be able to afford big cars or trips to Taiwan or whatever I want to spend my money on. But I'd still have no problem with paying my rent and getting food on the table. So you should not be afraid of failure as long as it's in some sort of reasonable failure. If it's going to mean that your parents get carted off and shot, then yes, you should be afraid of that. But if it just means that you crash a company or that something goes wrong, there are worse things in the world. These kinds of exercises are great. Thank you. Do you have a framework to help early stage startups come up with a valuation? Yes. Find something that makes you happy. There are so many frameworks. There are so many different ways of creating valuations. We got experts in on our Hans Christian Andersen startup, and their valuations were between 5 million and 60 million Danish kroner. And we got to some people who said, whoa, that's way too cheap. You guys are not serious. Here's what it should be. And we had some who said, you guys are idiots. That's way too expensive. You're not serious. So find something that makes you happy. And if it doesn't make you happy, then it doesn't really matter if somebody else believes it's the right valuation. And if it does, then you're probably going to find somebody who thinks it's the right thing. And when I say that, I mean it within a realistic sense. If you say, our company is worth $100 billion, then you may be happy, but probably nobody's going to pay for that. So there are tons of stuff to look at online, Google away, but don't get too discouraged. And don't settle too much on stuff because it's completely and utterly up in the air. Once you have things that are actually running, if you have this much revenue over this much period and this much growth, yada, yada, that's one thing. Then it's pretty easy and there are many ways to calculate that. But if you're still at like an early idea stage, it might as well be worth 10 million as it could be worth 0.1 million for the same company. Very, very hard to say. Any good underappreciated non-equity funding options? We're still building our new POC. Only. So there are many ways that you can get non-equity funding. And some of the classic one is going out and saying, hi, I would like your money so I don't have to use my own. That's an obvious way to get funding. Another way is to borrow money. It's risky, especially if you don't have it, but it's something you can do. There's a third way, which is to sell early. Sell before you have anything, or do something else. Let's say that you're creating, and this is an example from a friend of mine who's creating a book, and the book is going to be sold on a book tour. And the book tour is going to be so crazy that people will pay quite a lot of money for the book, because the book will be an artifact that is sold on that tour. But the book in itself will probably not get sold without the book tour. The book tour will not happen without the book. So you could say, we're trying to fund $1 million to do something. And we could get that from investors, or we could get that by selling something else or by doing something else. it's pretty often that you do fundraising parties or fundraising activities instead of just getting straight fundraising. Now, the nicest is if just somebody comes along and says, here's my money, do what you want. But if that's not possible, then there are many other ways you can do it. Crowdfunding, again, advanced sales. You can do partnerships. Say that you partner with somebody where you say you need to pay for the development costs. You need to pay the 50,000 here, but that means you get 40% of the sales up until the first $500,000 of sales. And they say, okay, well, we pay 50,000, but we're going to get 200,000 out of the first $500,000 in sales. That seems like a good idea if they believe in your product. That's one way to do it. And I think the best way to do it there is to sit down and think outside the box as much as you can and check out what weird things are online. And then come up with, look at different industries. It's very classic that industries have their own right and wrong ways of doing things. And if you look outside that, then you can go really, really far, also at an investment stage. Somebody came and said, Klaus, you do events. Why can't I buy a subscription where I just pay an amount every month and then I go to as many events as I want to? And I said, oh, that's smart. Why have we never thought of that? Because we've always sold one event, one price, or two events, 1.8 price, or whatever it was. We never considered at these events we did, which were pretty high-end ones, we never considered a subscription model because it seemed like it wouldn't work. And then you had customers actually asking for it. Question, how to decide the percentage of equity with the investor? The same as before, find something you're comfortable with. There is no good right answer to that. Some places you will end up saying, I don't want to give away more than 20%. Others you'll say, I don't mind giving away 80%. It's also about the investor. Imagine that Bill Gates comes to you tomorrow and says, hi, I'd like to invest in your company. And I'll bring in whatever money you want times 5 because we're going places. However, I wanted 80% equity. Would you take that? I'd take it. Some people would never take it. Sometimes people say, I don't want to give out anything more than 49%. Others say, I don't care if I end up with 6%, if it's 6% of Disney. Or 0.01% of Apple is still worth a lot of money. So what makes you feel comfortable? Does the status of the education have an influence on the chance of getting funding, meaning we're still just an undergrad? Yes. So this is an interesting question. The others are well, but this is really interesting because what education does, apart from you learn stuff and you get to meet people and all these lovely things, is that it's a stamp of approval from somebody. It's something that looks good and that gives you raised ethos, gives you more authority. If I go out and say, hello, people, let me teach you about how to market your startup. And you say, that's great, Klaus, but who are you? And I say, well, I just started on a marketing degree and I've been studying at the University of Copenhagen, the Copenhagen Business School for 1 year. You're going to say, yeah, that's great. But if I say, well, I happen to be a professor of marketing at the Copenhagen Business School, then you're going to listen much more, even if I say the same thing. If I also say, well, I spent a couple of years working at Google, and then I was working for the Danish energy ministry, so now you should listen to what I say. Stamps of approval, whether they're from you have written 500 blog posts about it, or you did the education, or you work for the company, or you are good friends with Martin Scorsese, or whatever it is, they will help you get to places. Not because you necessarily say anything different, but because people listen in a different way. I happen to be a coach at the consulting company, McKinsey & Company. And whenever I get into people who kind of question my corporate credentials, then I just flash the McKinsey card because it's one of the most kind of high-end consulting houses in the world, and then they shut up. It doesn't matter what I say if they don't trust me because of who I am. And taking an education is one way of making people trust who you are. If you also learn stuff, that's great. If you meet amazing people, that's great. But it's a classic that if you go to like Yale or Harvard or Oxford or some of the really prestigious universities out there, especially the big name American ones, the best thing you get out of that is not what you learn. There's been study after study to prove that. It's the people you know, and it's the stamp that you now have. And once you've worked at Facebook, you can use that when you're 50. Then it's like, oh, ex-Facebook says blah, blah, blah. So education, yes, get it because it'll make the rest of your life easier. Big name brands, do it because it'll make the rest of your life easier. And if you also learn something, that's even better. Government grants. Government grants are wonderful, but are slow and are annoying and are usually pretty hard for if you're a business. A lot of government grants, again, depends on country, but a lot of government grants are much easier to get if you're like a nonprofit or you're a civic institution or you're working with a university or if you're a really big company. So I would say, yes, try it if you're good at writing and you like writing, because a lot of them are written. But if not, don't spend your energy on it because it's just going to suck up a lot of time and effort. Even better if you could get somebody else to do it. If you're good at it, do it. If you're not, then I'd say it's an impractical place to go. Win competitions. I'm actually going to challenge Morten on that one. And that's not because I have anything to do against competitions. I think they're amazing, but it's pretty easy, especially if you're in one of these nice Western countries where there's a huge startup ecosystem. It's pretty easy to get caught up within the ecosystem. And suddenly you're spending all your time going to founder meetings and open house things for startups and pitch competitions and interviews and all that sort of thing. And that can be great, can be really nice. But it's also easy to spend a lot of time on that sort of thing without it necessarily going anywhere. So I'd say if you like the style, again, it's like government grants. If you like the style, if you like the other stuff you get out of it, for example, the friends and the experience and the learning, then go, go, go. If not, it's really tough. I mean, you started out 2,000 startups in this competition, and the prize money is $40,000 US. So if everybody just got that equally, there'd be $20 for each. It's not necessarily like a huge return on investment statistically. And where there is something beautiful in saying, we're going to be number one of 2,000. Statistically, there are other bets that are also good to take. Let's put it that way. Any advice about exiting? I'd say the best exit you can do is the one where you have enough money to live comfortably from now on. Not a lot of money, not like $100 million exit. That's great. But if you can get a $1 million exit or something like that, for some countries, it's more. If you're in Switzerland, it's more. If you're in Namibia, it's less. If you can make that sort of exit, that means that you don't really have to worry about money for the rest of your life, then you're golden, because then you can take risks for the rest of your life on your business that, as long as you have that set aside, that aren't really risks. So I'd say the best exit is not a 100 million exit. The best exit is a live comfortably from now on. In Denmark, I'd say that number would be something like $3 million or so, maybe roughly 3, 4 or so. If I had $3 or $4 million, I wouldn't have to worry about money ever again. And maybe I'd only need 2 because I'm old. But if you get to that point, then you don't have to worry about money ever again. You have to worry about, do I get rich, or can I support the causes I want to, or can I go to send my kids to the university I want to? Can I do that vacation to France, which is of course important, but you don't have to worry about eating. You don't have to worry about paying rent. And maybe that number is a lot smaller for you in the place you are or kind of the lifestyle you want. So I'd say the best exit you can get is that one. Then let your second exit be the 100 million one, if that's your passion. Honest, we've got an offer of investment. Nice guys. They build up the company from nothing. They offered 30,000 for the 50%. It looks and smells strange. No. I mean, not to me. I don't know about your project. I don't know about what you're doing, but 30,000 euro for 50%. I mean, that's a solid amount of money for most of us. And 50% means that they get to be in control. There's also a thing that a lot of investors have the feeling that since they have the money, they're the smart ones, so they should be in control. They'll gladly let you make the decisions as long as they can pull the trigger. Consider it like a relationship where you can decide 90% of what's going on as long as you make sure to check with your partner and they just say, yeah. Then you get to make most of the decisions as long as they just get to approve them. Does the real control lie with you, who makes 90% of the decisions, or with them, who makes the 10%, but are the ones you disagree on? So of course the 10%. And that means that there are people who will go into this and they will say, I want control. I'll give you the money, I'll give you the freedom, but I want control, because if I don't have control, then you could do anything. You could just buy vans for all the money and spray paint them pink and blow them up and film it and put it on YouTube. But if I have 51% or 50%, 50.01, then I'm in control. And then of course I'll let you do what you want because you're doing well, but I don't have to be afraid of you blowing up vans on the internet. So I don't think that's a weird offer. Is it good enough for you? I don't know. Wow, don't take it. 30K for 50%, ridiculous terms. Depends. Again, let's say Bill Gates comes to me tomorrow and says, Klaus, you have a great idea. I love this, this app that you're developing that helps with public sector efficiency. I want to buy it for $10,000 for 51%. On the plus side, I'm going to put my entire power behind it. So for $10,000 that I get in my hand, I get Microsoft behind me and Bill Gates. I take that in a minute. Without even blinking, I would take that. And the reason for it is that Bill Gates and Microsoft have a power that I could never even get close to. And who cares if I only now own 49% and I only got $10,000? My company now suddenly is going to go places. So is it ridiculous? Not to me. Depends on who's offering. If I offer one of you 30,000 for 50%, you better say, Klaus, what exactly are you bringing to the table except that beard? That's maybe worth 10%, but not 50. Bill Gates, it's a different story. Will investors invest in students? Yes, they will. Yes, investors will invest in students. Investors like people who have no life and who have big dreams and who are either very experienced and nice to work with, or who are very young and can be controlled. And that's, of course, a crazy blanket statement, which is just in line of what I warned you against at the beginning, that investors will say what investors like and they'll be wrong most of the time. But one of the nice things about people who don't have a lot of success is that they're easier to pivot. If you've already won 3 gold medals in high jumping at the Olympics and somebody says you should start swimming, then that's going to be a pretty tough sell. But if you're 19 and somebody says you're good at high jumping, but you're also good at swimming, why not go for the swimming? Then that's a pretty easy sell. So your young age and the fact that you're undergrads can be a huge advantage. Sure, you don't bring as much experience, that's true, but you do bring power and you bring time. Just a thing like, how many of you have kids? Raise hand, how many have kids? Kids are death on entrepreneurship. It's not that you can't have kids and be an entrepreneur. It's just so much harder. Being able to say, oh, I'm going to work through the night, or, oh, I'm going to go on that trip, or, oh, I'm going to be at that meeting, without having a 2-year-old running in going, wah! And I have a 2-year-old. I know exactly what I'm talking about. It's crazy. And the things that I could do before I had a kid as an entrepreneur, I'd regularly work 70, 80-hour weeks, and I loved it. And I had a wife who was cool with that. Now, if I work 40, I'm working a lot because I'm also a father and I want to be a father, and that takes up time. And I just have one small daughter. There are people who have 5 kids. I don't know how they survive anything, let alone being entrepreneurs. So there are many factors in play, and you have a lot of advantages because of who you are. When you have a proposal on 10% good money, investor wants all the money spent in company for giving. We have to take one of the co-founders out. This co-founder will exit without money. Okay, that sounds like a very strange scenario, but obviously that's the case. Then you need to talk with the co-founder. You need to make a decision. Is it more important to get the investment and lose the co-founder, or is it more important to keep the co-founder? There are some co-founders that I would gladly have sacrificed for 10% for good money. And there are some people who would gladly have sacrificed me for 10% at good money. And there are other times where it's definitely not the case. It's also because sometimes when you build teams, we have this idealistic vision that when we build teams, we build them based on skill sets and dreams and visions and alignment. But the reality is it's more like, hey, George, we're drunk. Should we start a company? Yeah, let's start a company. Great, let's sell shoes. Oh, I don't like shoes. How about boots? Yeah, let's sell boots. And then tomorrow you start up boots.com. And it turns out that neither you nor George know anything about boots, but now you're set on it and you told your girlfriend you're going to do it. So now you need to learn. That's a much more common investor story or startup story than somebody sitting down and saying, we need these 8 profiles in our team. And we're going to get the best people from the best places. You work with who you know, you work with friends, you work with people that you click with, you work with people who make you feel good, or people who happen to be available, or people who may not know what they need, but they could maybe at some point, or people who don't. So depends on how important the co-founder is. And we have one question more, and then I'm going to cut it off. If we're able to continue the business by ourselves, should we sell our souls to investors? Depends on how important money is to you. I had a dream for many years of making money that is more or less the average wage in Denmark. That was my dream. For a lot of people, that wouldn't be nearly enough for the life that I led. Because I worked 2 times full-time, meant my hourly wage, even if I'd managed that, would have been horrible. And I never managed that. For other people, they want to have 20,000 euros a month. So selling your soul depends on how much you like your soul and how much you like the money and what it buys you. Maybe it buys your mom cancer treatment. I'd sell a lot of soul for that. But for a new Ferrari, well, I don't even have a driver's license, so I don't think that's a good sell for me. And I'd love to answer more questions, but we are running out of time. And there's one thing that I had almost forgotten to do, which is that this is The Innovation Cycle, the book I just wrote with a guy called Robert Laszlo Kiss, industrial designer. And the deal is this: I have 3 of them to give out. And one of them is going to go to Nicholas from Swap Language for volunteering. So Nicholas, if you send me or you send Venture Cup a mail with your physical address, there's going to be a book on the way for you.
I already have you on LinkedIn.
Then it's easier. Just write to me directly on LinkedIn. Smart man. And the second book is going to go to, where do we have her? From Nomi. Guyane, or do I, Guyane?
Yes, Guyane.
Guyane?
Thank you very much.
There's a book for you. And the third one, we're going to do something very, very tricky. And that is that the first person who goes in to LinkedIn and who connects with me will get the third book, who's not already connected. On LinkedIn. And if nobody wants to, that's fine. Don't worry about that. But the next person who sends me a connection request on LinkedIn will get a book. Boom. Ryan, founder of Farm Hut. Excellent. We have a winner. Speedy and fast. Send me your address on LinkedIn and I will send it to you. And if anybody else is interested in the book, you can order one online, you're more than welcome to. There's even a early bird discount if you want a 50% discount on it. So just type in early bird if you find it somewhere and order it. And if you can't find it, then it's not important enough for you to order it. So then use your money on other stuff. It's easily findable on the interwebs. That was that. I would love to answer the last questions, but as said, I promise not to go too much overtime. So Morten, how much overtime can we go? 0 is an okay answer.
We had a bit of a break now, so I think those who need a break can go on a break, and those who really have posted some questions that they really want some answers to, I think maybe they can stay around for a couple of minutes and hear Klaus's answers to them.
And thank you, Anders, who's up next.
Yeah, because we have a 10-minute break scheduled now.
Thank you.